Buenos días de nuevo, vuelvo a ser Santiago Arranz.
Hello, this is Santiago Arranz again, and we're now going to move on to the panel discussion. We're going to hold on how to add value to business through the DevOps strategies. We have Ventura Miguel, who's responsible for technology and operations at PagoNxt, and as you know, this is a company of the Grupo Santander. Good morning, Ventura. Good morning, Santiago. How's everybody? How's everything? Well, it's great to be here with you guys today. So I'm going to give you the floor directly, and I hope that you will enjoy the panel discussion. Well, great. Well, let me kick off by thanking you for the invitation and for allowing us to have a good time together. And I would just like to make a very brief introduction. PagoNxt, as Santiago pointed out, PagoNxt is a Grupo de Santander company that is only a few months old, and in essence, well, let's say that we started to work just under 2 years ago. Or somebody said in one of the previous sessions that all companies are becoming technology companies. So we define ourselves as a tech company too. So what we're doing is providing new services. Many of them are disruptive that didn't exist in the world of payments, and we're using technologies that were equally new or pretty new for us in many of these environments. So we want to distinguish or differentiate ourselves based on the technology we use and because of the business services we offer. So we deliver technology, but technology for the business. And this is what is going to give now rise to the panel discussion. PagoNxt, some figures for you. Although, as I said, we started off with different initiatives just about 2 years ago, and it's now about 1,500 people in the company, and it's 16 locations from San Francisco all the way to Chennai in India, or Porto Alegre in Sao Paulo in Brazil, or Munich in Germany. Well, I'm not going to give you the entire list, of course, but it's 16 locations. And we want to provide services by the end of this year to nearly 200,000 companies in the world of international business. And we want to reach out to 1.7 merchants. And our turnover, roughly 128 billion for merchants. And this is something that started a short time ago, but the truth is that we have a very significant ambition for this year. And I'm firmly convinced that this in part has been thanks to the possibility of creating new things with the new work methods that we have in relation to the world of clouds and of DevOps and Agile. I'm not going to say anything else in this introduction. I'm going to allow each of my colleagues to introduce themselves, and I'm going to start off with Diego. So you go ahead and introduce yourself, Diego. Well, thank you very much. Thanks a lot for inviting me to this panel discussion. I'm sure that it's going to be a very pleasant session. My name is Diego Duro, and I'm responsible for engineering at Santander Technology and Operations in Spain. And as regards my area of expertise, we're in charge of technological transformation of DevOps. And we're leading this change of this transformation we're trying to carry out in Santander to move on to this way of working. Okay, Bruno, what about you? Introduce yourself, please. Hello, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Bruno. I'm from PagoNxt. I'm from the payment platform of Merchant Solutions, and therefore I'm responsible for everything that has to do with cloud computing, DevOps, cybersecurity, and networking and operations in this part of PagoNxt. And as Ventura just pointed out, yes, we've been working since 2019 in this road to cloud, and it's incredible how much speed we've picked up, and we'll be talking about this during the event. Okay, well, thank you very much, Bruno. And now, Juan, your turn. Hello, it's great to be here. My name is Juan Laje, and I am working as the Principal Solutions Architecture at Amazon Web Services, and in particular, I'm working with global actors in the world of finance, both for banks and insurance firms, and I'm assisting them in adopting cloud with a very significant component for all of them, which has to do with the adoption of DevOps tools and culture. And it's great to be here with you today. Thank you very much, Juan. And what about you, David? David, please introduce yourself now. Hello, everybody. Thanks for inviting me. Well, I've been working in the field of IT for about 20 years. I was a programmer and have done many, many things in this field. And now I'm very focused on the world of recruiting, which I think is something that affects all of us. And I try to express or deliver my point of view on the world of DevOps in the current labor market. Great. Well, thanks a lot, David. Okay, well, to open the discussion, you can see that this has to do with how DevOps is transforming different companies that have been doing things in a specific manner. And I think that we all want to converge on these tech companies. We want to change the way things are done. And well, in this, David obviously will say something about this and consider whether companies are or are not giving any consideration to this. But Diego, I'm going to start off with you. Let's open fire with Santander. I don't have to explain the Grupo Santander, which is an enormous company with many systems that are undergoing a transformation. So how's this experience? What is this implementation process like at Santander? Well, in Santander, like practically everywhere, we were like in everything else, we always are somewhat lagging behind. This is like an ocean liner that's very difficult to move. But once we get going, it is true that we pick up speed very quickly, and the benefits soon appear in what we're trying to get done with this transformation. So there are several legs that we have in DevOps. We have the culture and the different ways of working and the technological branch or leg, and we try to address each and every one of them, although not all of them are traveling at the same speed, of course. And you know that with culture, it's always a little bit more complex because, you know, we're dealing with human beings and people are resistant to change and they don't want to do things differently. And I'd say that this goes a little bit slower, but we have accelerated a lot. We have managed to speed up what has to do with the ways of working and especially the technology. We've headed for the cloud. We've really reinforced that, and we've worked very hard to implement all the mechanisms and tools and automatisms, etc., that will allow us to use the new technologies with two main benefits for the business. That is time to market on the one hand, and on the other, a reduction or working more efficiently from an operational perspective. And we are more efficient. And this obviously means that you're reducing your time to market. And well, there's always a reduction of operating costs, which is another important thing. Well, you mentioned something, well, before I give the floor to your colleagues, that has to do with cultural change. And this is something that can not only be focused on tech, because cultural change means that this affects the entire organization, because how you are working, that is the business owners, all the way down to the person that is carrying out the final implementation, and represents a change covering the entire implementation cycle of a project. So do you think, well, sometimes this, when seen from outside, it seems that it's a problem for tech crazy guys that say a couple of things that only they are familiar with. So what is it you think we can do? So what is it we can do to achieve this cultural change? How can we get it out of the tech environment? Well, I think that obviously, this is how it starts because, well, there are many things that have to do with technology and business. Well, what we have to do, we have to see benefit or profit. And we have some pure business projects where the business is very involved with its product owners and its business owners, where they've covered 2 or 3 weeks in their cycles to implement something that they needed, and now it's only hours. And this is something they have perceived, and they say, "Oh, this makes sense," because these techies are not only doing technological stuff. So the more I become involved, the easier it is for my requirements to be sped up, etc., etc. So it's important for them to see the return on this, because at the beginning it's somewhat difficult. So, okay, so we have to demonstrate things by doing them. Well, perhaps we don't publicize this enough. That is the connection between the new way of working and the results. And I'm not going to say any more because I want to give the floor to the other speakers. To Bruno, you are a person that was working, well, in Brazil. And this kicked off in a company called with 2,000 people with an enormous level of success in the market. And in 4 years, well, it was in a very low position and now is in the top three of Brazil. And Brazil is a very large country. But you jumped. In other words, you were doing things in a specific manner, and all of a sudden you changed from one lane to another, and you jumped into the supposedly fast lane. So, what is your experience? Well, yes, the transformation was very curious. And as Diego pointed out, it's the cultural change is much more important than the technological change because both of things will run alongside each other, but they have to support each other too. But basically, what we have is a situation in which all of the requirements for what we have to develop from the very beginning when products and the trade are involved, well, it's not only the text, it's everybody else. Everybody becomes involved. And this is how you can obtain a product. And when the product people start to see this, the cultural change is completely natural for them. And for us, well, we have to adapt our speeds because we have several work streams that are operating or running at different speeds, because there are things that are slower and things that are more modern, that are much quicker, like microservices and APIs, and we have to converge all of these things. So this is where we have the major difficulty in this transformation. But as Ventura pointed out, I came from JetNet and I saw the growth and exponential growth of a company in 5 years. It obtained 15% of the Brazilian market share by performing thousands of transactions every day. And you can see the weight of the legacy, because sometimes, or at a given point in time, the weight of the legacy makes you become slower. And these new technologies have to allow you to advance. When in 2019, when we decided to take the GetNet story and make it international, we said, okay, let's do so in a modern manner. And then we decided to start to experiment with modern methods to address the future. But we were going to do all of this through data centers because Santander has an enormous data center in Brazil, tier 4, fantastic. So the time to market in the project, well, in February, which was that point in time until November, we were going to receive all the closures. And from then on, we would then implement the developments. And the truth is that we moved into the cloud, and when November came along, we had customers operating in the platform. So the time to market was reduced a lot, and the cultural change had an influence on everything. And running is expensive, but I haven't got any idle time. I don't have machines waiting for new things, and I don't have to buy anything in advance, and I don't have any obsolescence involved either. So all of these things, all of this gives us speed and also gives us the approach we need to improve architecture and the way we work. I was smiling because I don't know how the interpreters are going to translate some of the terms, but anyway, it's perfect. But I'm sure that we'll understand each other. Okay, Juan, at Amazon. Well, as we can see you, well, I know that you are far in the lead in relation to us because you were born as a tech company. So therefore, you have always been talking about these issues. But in your particular case, this evolution, how have you experienced it? And ours too, the customers, how are you experiencing this? Or what is your impression? Well, it is true. It is true that perhaps that we've already covered part of the way, and perhaps without really saying too many things, I could present three different angles. One of them has to do with Amazon, Amazon.com for the headquarters, and another one would be Amazon Web Services. And as you say, it was born with this culture, and then what we can see in the case of our customers. But to start off with Amazon, I think that, well, this impinges on what my colleagues pointed out before in terms of culture. Because if we look at Amazon from 2001 to 2009, there was a major transformation in the business. In 2002, there was a manifest, a legendary manifest from Jeff Bezos, And in it, he spoke about a microservice environment, but then after that, in the DevOps culture, what it's all about is destroying the silos and having a much closer cooperation between development, engineering, and deployments. And then we have the tools themselves, because at that point in time, we didn't have the tools, and many things were created, and the well-known pipelines. That was done internally at Amazon. And the final outcome has brought about enormous growth of Amazon that has been sustained to a large extent by that change. And it's a company that has organizes more than 130,000 deployments per day, more than 50 million a year, which is fundamental. And Amazon Web Services was born with this premise, and in a way that would have been impossible should that not culture exist, because before, perhaps we were talking about, in the case of web services, we were talking about 15 servers. And when you want to operate a cloud infrastructure, you need to have you have to stand many orders of magnitude above that. But perhaps from my point of view, the most interesting thing is what our customers are doing, as you pointed out. And the truth is that here, when the culture of DevOps and the associated tools do allow you, generally speaking, and this is something that we have seen in many cases, it gives you a greater degree of agility for all companies, from startups to large corporations, technological or whatever, or manufacturers like Qualcomm, where they've multiplied by 5 the number of deployments, or 3M, for instance. They've also reduced this from months to less than 1 week for their deployments.
Regulada, como es el caso de la industria de finanzas, ¿no? Donde hay un escrutinio muy
and
grande.
then in the case of finance and industries, the challenges are much more specific.
But we don't see the exception. I've directly worked with customers like Lebanese, for example, that work in the area of credit insurance, part of the Alliance Group, where they've made a very big effort regarding roles, hiring, culture, and tools for the DevOps, and the results coincide: greater agility, deploying 5 or 6 mainstream services per year, and then the reliability they've achieved. The fact that in their accounts there's no human intervention. They just use automation and strictly following the DevOps principles. And this has been translated into greater service availability and reliability. So these are patterns we see in all sectors and in all companies. You named 2 issues that I think are basic to understand how DevOps makes more agile, improves and ensures the quality of our deliveries. You've named automation and you've named testing. Automation in a more complex environment, when you do something very small and very clearly defined, maybe you don't think about it. But when you start to think about scalability and you start to talk about continuous delivery, if you forget about the automation step, you're going to be inefficient and you're not going to achieve your goals. So I think that this should be understood not just by us, but outwardly, the way of automating and ensuring testing. Means that we need to know what we want to automate and what we want to test. And that's the only complete cycle that can ensure some of the things you're saying, right? That's it. And the ultimate aim is still the business, because you automate to be more agile and you also automate the testing side. And even perhaps go as far as chaos engineering in order to come to a much better business continuity. The goal is always the business, and the DevOps transformation is basic, it's instrumental. I would like to add something, and this is something that we've seen in our historical results. Everything we build together with automated testing and all the necessary quality scans. The pipeline is zero touch, no human intervention, and the environments change during all the necessary quality scans, security scans, and all the automated testing. We do thousands of automated tests. Of course, there are integration testing that still needs more automation, and they're a little bit more complex, but progress is being made. Something that's very important, we talk a lot about DevOps, but the sec in the middle, DevSecOps, is also extremely important. Theoretically, in the hacking is something that you put at the end. You do the penetration test to make sure it's all right, and you publish your service on the internet. We change that slightly. We do the sec together with the dev. So we have an ethical hacking team looking at, from the beginning, security by design of the applications. So the applications are being developed and their logic is being tested before the product is ended, and we correct it as we go along. And this greatly reduced the delivery time. A delivery has at least 2 weeks of ethical hacking at the end that we've cut back, plus the correction time. So it's a change in the whole pipeline that's very important to be more agile. And that's what's guaranteed at the end of the day. Thank you, Bruno. Let me hand over to David. David, from your company, from Manfred. You're constantly receiving requests from other companies. How does the market understand the need for DevOps? What's your perception? Well, it's I'm very curious. There's a continuous tension, let's say, or a debate in the community at the companies to define DevOps a little bit, as Juan said, a culture, a skill, a superpower that programmers have to have, and on the other hand, a role. It's true that programmers are pushing more and more to integrate DevOps in their toolbox, and the companies, and we're all the same. We're looking for more specialists, and they want that DevOps figure, a developer, a technician that's very much focused on DevOps. And I think that virtue is in the middle ground. DevOps has to be something that permeates the whole structure, the whole development culture, what Bruno said. But in the end, there are people, especially in bigger structures, not in startups so much, but there are people that have to focus on cleaning it all up. And at companies, all is very complicated, all sounds terrible. And what are you talking to me about? I have to have a whole set of automated tests, etc. But I think that this panel should help us to put into context where we come from. In the remote past, I also worked in banking, and to change text column from 8 characters to 12, I was given 2 weeks. And we're talking about breaking those silos. Development on the one hand, I do my code and forget about it. I have nothing to do with it, and we'll see what happens. And we need to break that silo with systems. And I think that's what DevOps has done. I think the market has understood it perfectly well, has understood all the advantages, and they are very positive positions. And you bring up something here which I think is also very interesting. And it's a discussion we have in companies, evolution versus transformation. Why do I say this? Because when somebody changes 2 weeks to change a text column, from there to taking minutes or taking 2 weeks to deliver a major product, that is a major transformation. I have solution A, where I take 2 weeks to change a text. I'm going to change the way I provide services, and then I'll see how the service I was providing over here can be provided somewhere else. But this is a major debate to be held at companies. Is it a matter of saying, bringing somebody from DevOps to see how I can reduce the 2 weeks I take to change a text column, or bringing somebody from DevOps to work in parallel? What's the aim at your company? More evolution, transformation? Well, of course, we have two types of companies. Startups are companies that start from scratch. Well, there's no discussion there. Anybody that's worked with physical iron, with hardware, you have to wait for the hardware to come in to put it on the rack. There's no discussion whatsoever. I would say that none of the customers we have don't consider jumping to cloud, DevOps, and the rest. And regarding bigger companies that are already established, it's a little bit what you said. They're more like, let's start a separate line, and in the end, through osmosis, everybody will tend to go in that direction. When we talk about large companies, they have their own inertia, their own culture, and the best way of changing it is for the guy that's changing the column from 8 to 12 characters to say, I want to do this. I don't want to be the gatekeeper changing things manually on the database. I want to do something cooler, and look at what they're doing. So that's how they usually start. Let's start with something smaller and then take the lead. Well, in our case, and it's not the only case I know, obviously I've talked to other companies about how they're doing it, but you touched on another very interesting point. This is a major lever for internal motivation today. We're growing a lot, but there were people that were working in a certain way. And once we've proved that something can be done, and you show a result, you can't do anything without a PowerPoint. But once you've proven that you can do something, and there are people who say, I don't want to work this way anymore, I want to work that way. Diego, this happens in such a big animal like Santander, where for a long time you're going to have a coexistence between what we were saying about changing the column, or people working in the new technologies. This is part of the big challenge when you're carrying out this cultural transformation. There isn't the same speed. There are projects that start from scratch, or that use technologies that are easier to transform. This used to be done in a Westfield format. I'm going to take it to a microservice because it's much easier. Or there are other projects that have to be maintained, because let's not forget that the bank opens every day, that the customers look at their accounts every day, they make payments, and they're more based on COBOL, they're more based on more traditional databases, they're not so easy to transform, and they're big monsters, they're not little databases or systems, and the transformation speed, or having the opportunity of everybody being able to say, I want to work like my colleague does, but how can I do it? Because my technology is more complicated. So that's where we have to establish a balance, a little bit for everyone. What's come out in the debate is that we believe in it. It's true. It works. We're all convinced. And I open the question to anyone. How do we measure it? Since we have to prove it, as we said at the beginning, and this is true, how can we measure something? Because we all have stories, and Bruno was saying, we've taken the same time to have the first productive customer in Mexico from a cloud that was in blue in Virginia. We've had the first productive customer in the first time, in the same time they were going to take to serve the infrastructure in Brazil. So I'll open the discussion. How can we measure to prove that this should be a cultural change throughout the entire organization? Any suggestions, any comments? The method itself that accompanies DevOps and cloud and all this, that people end up setting up together, the agile methods of Save, Scrum, etc., give you a different visibility. And we suffer this at the beginning of the project because we're all used to living with the previous project manager methods of having an enormous gun and looking at things landmark by landmark. And when you start to have a number of things running in parallel, and every 2 weeks I have an outcome, and every 2 weeks I can present the week's progress, and as you make small readjustments for the next sprint, and you bring in the business people, and you see what's being built instead of leaving a letter of intent as to what's going to be done with the project in 6 months. I think that gives us the perception of more speed. How do you measure? You measure the number of features that you're delivering to each sprint and the increase. This is what really brings value to the business. The more features I can deliver to the business, or improve my product, or improve my efficiency, this is how we're going to measure it. And I think that it's a fairly healthy exercise to do it from time to time. When Bruno speaks, you can see that we're bringing in younger and younger people to the debate, because we can hear your baby, Bruno, but don't talk to him about these things or he won't be able to sleep. Yeah, he was really born in the cloud, completely. I wanted to say something that's done at Amazon. But as Bruno said, there are indicators that can be used on a business level regarding the speed of deployment of new functions, etc., or also quality and availability criteria. But something they do at Amazon, for example, is that there's a satisfaction survey and patterns of use done with developers on a regular basis, and which is visible at the highest executive level. And this is another way of measuring the impact and the adoption we have in the culture. We always look to establish what we call mechanisms to automate the way we work. And these mechanisms always have the tool, the goal, and the measurement. Usually with surveys that verify the adoption of these practices, because the end DevOps is a matter of shared responsibility, and accepting that that responsibility is shared, and understanding, as Diego said earlier, that there are organizations and certain applications where it's much more difficult. For example, we always try to find out where the customer is in that sense. But whenever it's possible, it's good to verify that there's an adoption and that it has a positive impact, that people see it and want to go in that direction. And we do it through these internal surveys and with the visibility of those surveys within the structure. Juan, this isn't a criticism, but sometimes I get the feeling that the rationale regarding your customers is that the cloud is much cheaper. And we look more at the cost than the contribution to the business, which is where I think, or at least that's my experience, where you can really obtain an enormous added value. When we started to think about cloud, it was, well, okay, we believe that this is going to be cheaper and I'm going to have it sooner. But this is more cost related, but not related to the speed with which I can deliver to my business. As Bruno said, twice every 2 days, or as you said, several times a day. And I think that we all need to change this in the way we see or explain the advantages. What do you think? I completely agree. It's a very good comment. And yes, I absolutely agree. I think that the benefit lies in the speed, in the agility, And to continue with the issue of DevOps and automation and so on, that speed cannot and shouldn't be obtained at the expense of quality. But I absolutely agree. The first approach and the first comparison is always focused on costs. And yes, perhaps the infrastructure is available more quickly, but seen from the point of view of how much I can save with that, and I agree, that's not the right approach. The great value lies in the speed to market. What David said earlier, when you're told, I need 3 DevOps, can you say, wait, you need N different positions to be able to transform your whole process, which isn't just DevOps? Is there this duality between position and function in the organization? Do companies want to listen to you or not? With Juan, we talk about cost, and with you, we talk about DevOps, which I think is something we need to change at the companies too. What's your view? I think that David dotted the T's. We have to talk about the transformational aspect, how the organization has to evolve in its roles, and the cultural side. I think that this is a fundamental debate. I agree with David's position of finding a middle ground, because it's true that the DevOps function has to exist, because people that are developing front end are very accustomed to the new mainframes, the new libraries, and we can't all be so up to date on the DevOps tools. And that specialization is needed to know what's the latest and the best to be able to continue with the best practices. But it has to be mainstream too. So there's part of the role that we all need to be involved in. But it's a debate that affects us all and all companies. And David, do you have the opportunity of having this conversation with the companies or not? In other words, when they ask you for a station, for this to work, do you have to create a role or not? Well, we're privileged because we're technicians, and we usually talk directly to CTO and so on, and they usually do listen to us. But this is science fiction. Imagine if a recruiter comes in and says to the CTO, no, you've got it wrong. And what happens to us doesn't usually happen. We're in a privileged position, but it's quite simple to convince them. You were asking earlier about what is the metrics for success, and the metrics for success are quite simple. And this might sound pretty rough. How many people need to be run over by a truck to stop the company? And before I worked with the typical watchman at the gate to allow a release. The release concept no longer exists. I want something immediately, not in a month's time or in 5 days or 5 hours. I want it right away. And whoever develops the patch, I want them to take it directly up to production. But when you say this, what do you mean? That any programmer can be able to go with a patch to production? And the answer is yes. And if you're not capable of doing that, there's something missing. What do you have to add? Everything we've discussed in this panel discussion, automatic testing embedded in the process itself, so that when there's a commit, even if you do it on purpose, you know it's not going to get to production because you've set up the infrastructure. So that's the sale point, and it's quite easy to sell. Everybody can see the advantages compared to on the 14th, we're bringing out version 3.0. That is a thing of the past. You referred to something. We're making payments. We're making ultra-sensitive payments. And it has to be resolved in real time, as you said, if there's a bug. So I can't wait for processes, and I've experienced this in-house, change management. when they said 2 days without a service or 1 day without a service, or 6 hours if it's quick. But shutting down a payment service for 6 hours is a drama, especially for the customers that in the end receive the service. So I can only say you're right. And I come back to a subject that I think we've also touched upon, and which is another condition, in fact, in our case, and that businesses should know. It's very difficult to consider yourself to be global and scale up if all this is not embedded. And I use Bruno as an example because I know him. He has a service for Mexico, a service for Argentina. He's going to start to provide a service for other countries in Europe. And without automation, without pipeline management, without testing, this is impossible. I used to work on projects in the past, and they were immense in cost, years, effort, etc., etc. So it's all advantages. It's obvious. And Diego, I come back to you. Of all this we're discussing, you're one of the engines that have to make this happen while the bank opens every day. And people go into the branch to look at their bank balance, and you have to provide it. And as David says, there's no discussion when I work with a startup or a tech company, but there are companies where you still have to convince the CTO. That's part of the big challenge, doing it on a large scale. One can probably teach us more lessons because they're much bigger. But it's not so easy to convince people that I have a bug and I have to sort it out right away, because I may not have one service, I have two. And we have multiple services, multiple applications, they're all regulated, and they are all critical. So it's not just a matter of what I can do technologically. As a bank, I don't want to have an impact on my customer through two different channels at the same time. It's unlikely because I've automated testing and many other things, but it can go wrong. So I can't afford the luxury of a customer not be able to look at their balance on the mobile phone and on the website at the same time. So I have to combine not just technology and pipeline, but also distributed processes so that we won't use that agility in the usual change management process. But these distributed processes that provide a global view of everything that's happening throughout the company in order to avoid changes that could have an impact on the customer on the critical channels. You don't touch payments at the same time you touch cards or this sort of thing. And this is a major challenge for us right now. Very good. I think that we can carry on talking about this for some time between us, but we're running out of time. So I'd like to end with a couple of suggestions. And one of them is for everybody in this kind of forum, we have to find a space to attract businesses and discuss in business terms what is being said and what we ask them as part of this cycle. And here we're mobilizing our product and technology communities. I think it's extremely important to find that space. I think it's extremely important to find a space where we can share. And Juan, you have a lot of customers. So let's share not just in endogamic or closed communities, but also in communities that are open to the world. Let's share these experiences with specific subjects, including the business managers. And this will make life easier for David when he talks to a company, for Bruno when he sees how others make improvements, for Juan because they'll no longer talk about cost. Well, no, we'll continue talking about cost with you. I'm absolutely sure of that. And Diego, because I think in organizations that are undergoing a transformation, I think it's very useful to bring in real transformations and for people to know Bruno, David, and Juan, and many others that can help. Any comments from your side? I think we've run out of time, but I don't know whether you'd like to add any comments. No, I'd just like to thank you for the panel discussion, a lot of many good insights. And finally, all this works very well when we think about services. We have to provide certain services to product development. We have to provide services to the product owners and the merchants or the traders that are using your services. And this starts by automating as much as possible, leaving everything controlled by work hills, and having a lean structure to do it. The easier things are, the quicker they're going to be. And there you'll be able to have your CI/CD, but always looking at all points. It's not that I'm going to forget about security because I have to be quick, or I'm not going to skip a couple of tests where you can find yourself crashing into a wall. Very good. Nothing else. Well, once again, I would like to thank you for giving us the opportunity of having this pleasant discussion together. And I hope we've done a good job and we'll be asked to come back. And if it's physically together, so much the better. Thank you all very much. Thank you. Goodbye.